Hello everybody, thank you very much for joining me for my review of the 1931 horror film Dracula, directed by Tod Browning and starring Bela Lugosi as the title character Dracula. And Dracula from 1931 is an interesting film in some ways. Unfortunately, it's also not as interesting as it could have been in my opinion. It's interesting because there's no doubt that this version of the classic story of Dracula is one of the most influential and iconic out there. It's influenced many, many vampire films and many other horror films, just in general for sure. And I won't dispute that fact at all. Unfortunately, from a modern perspective, this film doesn't totally hold up. It is dated in some areas. So this film is kind of a mixed bag for me. In terms of things that are good about Dracula, the title performance by Bela Lugosi, while it's not my favorite Dracula performance of all time, it's pretty menacing and creepy, especially when you consider film in 1931, the era that this was made in. As a matter of fact, I would say that Lugosi is definitely the best part of this film, and that's as high a compliment as I can give him, actually. But this film has some other good things going for it. It's very well shot. The cinematography and use of shadows is well above average for 1931 in my opinion. The film is also very moody and creepy in certain scenes, especially when Dracula is on screen. And there's some very nice visual storytelling in this film. There are quite a few scenes without a lot of dialogue where we just get to see the story told visually, which is kind of typical of some early horror films from the early sound era, and it works very well here. So those are the positives. Unfortunately, this film does have a couple big negatives for me. One of those is that the supporting characters are not very, very good. There's only one supporting character I found interesting at all in this film, and that was Renfield. And even he comes across as a little campy and over the top. Again, that's probably just the times, but his character is just a little too campy and almost feels like he belongs in a different movie. The other supporting characters aren't really interesting at all, and you might just say that's kind of the nature of the Dracula story, but I would argue that there's very many other versions of Dracula where characters like Mina, Van Helsing, and even Jonathan are more interesting than they are here. They just didn't really add anything to the film other than to give us exposition and further the plot, in my opinion. Another strange thing about this film that some people might argue is a positive, but I definitely thought was a negative, is this movie has almost no music at all, other than in like the opening title sequences. I thought this was very strange, and maybe that's what they were going for. Maybe they thought having no music would add mood, but I thought there were a lot of scenes that really could have been helped with some kind of musical score. It just felt a little odd after a while and made some of the scenes feel a little empty and not as solid as they could have been. After a while, I was actually really wishing there would have been music for some of the less interesting scenes. And that's my other issue with this film, is that most of the scenes that Dracula aren't in do feel a little bit dull. Back to the positive side of things, the ending builds up very nicely, but unfortunately, the ultimate payoff is kind of a letdown. If you know the Dracula story, you kind of know where I'm going with this. So overall, if you're a lover of classic films and you're someone who likes to see films that influenced a lot of other more modern films, then I would say Dracula from 1931 is worth checking out. It's a relatively short film, and it's pretty painless overall, I would say. Just don't expect a great film, in my opinion. So I'm going to give Dracula a 2.5 out of 5. Like I said, for film buffs, you might want to check this one out at least once. It's probably worth watching. Everyone else, you don't really need to bother with this film. So 2.5 out of 5 for Dracula. And as always, thank you very much for watching.